Welcome to Physical Disability Australia's webinar around acquiring disability later in life. It's wonderful to have you join us for tonight's event. We are sure you'll find it beneficial and helpful. My name is Robert Wise, and I'm the Victorian Associate Director of Physical Disability Australia. And I'm ably joined on the panel by Tim Hart, who is PDA's Victorian Director, and Andrew Fairbairn, who is PDA's President and WA Director. In this presentation, we'll be looking at issues often faced with transition to a new way of life as a person living with a disability, and provide you with information around your rights, available support, self-acceptance, and the importance of organisations such as PDA in your journey. With the estimated 4.4 million Australians living with a disability, approximately 93.1% or 4.1 million of these were acquired sometime after birth as a result of injury, developing health or genetic condition, illness, or medical complication. For many people, the induction of the disability journey can be challenging and uncertain, and simply finding information, supports, ways to best live our new way of life can seem overwhelming to a lot of us. From understanding disability rights and entitlements, accessing resources and tools, and self-care. This webinar will give you an insight into the disability journey of 3 people who acquired a disability later in life and continue to ensure that they live their best lives. I'd like to begin on behalf of PDA by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we dwell and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. PDA also acknowledges people with disability, past and present, those who are living full and complete lives, and those who have needs that have not yet been met. We ask you to reflect on this and to work with us to bring about the changes that will give all people with disability an opportunity to live an ordinary life. PDA welcomes you to today's webinar. Now for a bit of housekeeping. This presentation will run in 4 parts, beginning with me sharing a little bit about my journey and providing you with information, tools, support, and advice that help me with my disability transition and ongoing life as a person living with disability. Tim Hart will then take centre stage and give you insight into the coming terms of onset of disability, guiding you through helpful advice whilst providing a younger person's perspective around acquiring a disability. Andrew Fairbairn will then follow with his personal disability story and revision and consideration of employment options, potential career changes, and overwhelming personal relationships, community, and physical accessibility barriers. And the final part of this webinar will be a Q&A session with 3 of us answering questions supplied by both the attendees when registering for tonight's event, and then answering any questions that are posted to you by others in attendance. As all attendees will have the audio muted, please direct any questions by us by the chat option at the bottom of your screen. Depending on the time constraints, we'll endeavour to answer as many questions as possible. If you find yourself overwhelmed by the issues raised in tonight's webinar and need help and support, it's important that you take steps to reach out for support, whether this means speaking with a GP, friend, family member, or colleague, and getting in contact with a counselling service. It's important that you do this as soon as possible. Support can be provided by calling Lifeline on 131114, Beyond Blue or on 1300224636, or Headspace on 1800650890. Please know that you are not alone. We hope that you find this presentation helpful, informative, interesting, and hopefully entertaining. And so as I'll be starting off this webinar, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my disability story, what I've learned in my journey, and how I acquired disability as an adult. I was born with a genetic condition known as neurofibromatosis, which is a genetic condition where tumours form on the nerve tissue, and these tumours usually form around the spinal cord and even the brain. These tumours are mostly non-cancerous, but I had a number of these tumours in one of my legs, which was not a great problem during my childhood. It only restricted me ever so slightly. In 2003, one of these tumours started to grow at an accelerated rate, which led to movement restriction in one of my legs, and I began to limp sometimes or even tripping over. I decided to visit my GP, who then quickly referred me to a specialist who I had seen before. Even he was a little suspicious when he saw my condition and ordered an MRI scan. I then went back to get the results, and the story was not good. A tumour almost as large as a small football was growing in the upper part of my leg and several smaller ones below it. I was asked to join a medical conference of various specialists and professors at the Royal Melbourne Hospital here in Melbourne. And one of the orthopaedic professors took an interest in my case and took me on. He ordered a CT scan and a needle biopsy. And when these results came back, it was the worst case. The tumour had turned cancerous, called a soft tissue sarcoma. I was admitted to the hospital to carry out more tests, including bone scans, X-rays, CT scan of my lungs, and even blood tests. These were done to determine what was to be done. And in the end, I only had two options. One, to amputate the leg, or two, you have 12 months to live. The tumour in question had formed around the main nerve in my leg, so removing the tumour was out of the question. As if disturbed, it could spread faster through the body and attack mostly soft tissue, including the lungs. So as I started on the amputation, as I'd rather live with one leg or not live at all. The surgery was scheduled, and for them to try and clear the tumour and not disturb it, it was decided to remove the leg, including part of the hip joint. This amputation is known as a hip disarticulation. This is where part of the hip joint is removed. Months of rehab and chemo and more rehab followed. From that day, my life changed. I could not continue my job, and I was eventually told if I cannot do the job I was employed to do, I had to resign. Even most of the activities I was doing at the time came to an end. I went from getting around freely to life on crutches and using the wheelchair. I tried the prosthetic option, but found it quite restrictive and uncomfortable for long periods, as the prosthetic contained a hip joint as well as a knee joint and required lower back use just to swing it. And this put even more strain on my body, so I had to search other options to get out and about and live independently as I can. I found it hard at first to accept my new way of life, as I've always been very independent and was not one who liked to ask for help. At the time, there was no NDIS available, and since my disability was medical and not work cover or transport related, options offered were very limited. I found out that hospitals and other medical organisations have several resources available, and I suggest you start with those. Service can include occupational therapists, social workers, and counsellors. Ask questions. You may not feel like it at the time as you are going through a traumatic ordeal. The question that may sound silly to everyone else is not to you. These can include, how can I use public transport? E.g. getting on and off. Can I get or keep my driver's license? Many surveys are available, and you will not know until you ask. These surveys may include half-price taxis. I knew some of these options, and many options are now available, and many keep emerging. And many have certain eligibility criteria. These include disabled parking permits, half-price taxis, getting or keeping your driver's license, accessing public transport. These surveys can differ from state to state, and we'll share what's offered in Victoria and touch on some of the other states. Let's start with the half-price taxis. Half-price taxis available in most states of Australia, as are disabled parking permits. Rules differ slightly. Half-price taxi subsidies entitle you to you and anybody else travelling in a taxi 50% off the meter fare. This is up to a maximum subsidy of $60, but this is changing. This includes wheelchair accessible taxis, and with those you will not be charged a lifting fee. Most states do not accept cards from other states, but some offer vouchers that you can use interstate and pay 50% off the meter fare. Check with your state's taxi scheme if this is offered for you. In Victoria, this extends to the Uber rideshare service, and you can visit Uber's website and apply. And have your valid taxi card. If accepted, the discount is applied up front in the Uber app as a payment type, and you only pay the difference. Now, people with physical disabilities can still drive if they can safely do so. Many vehicles can be modified to enable you to drive, and this can include hand controls, reversing the pedals, for example, accelerate on the left. If you currently hold a driver license prior to your disability, you can continue driving, but you have to prove that you can drive safely. Your GP or specialist may temporarily suspend your license until this assessment is done. If you have a minor disability, you can sit a standard driving test and have no conditions added to your license. People who have more severe disabilities, the process is more complex and need to sit a disability driving test and rely on disability aids to control the vehicle, and this condition added to your license. With new drivers applying for their first license must declare all aspects of the disability and must also supply medical documents that they are fit to drive. This is for the safety of all other road users. It's important that all people with disabilities declare their disabilities to their state or territory's transport department, and that includes changes in disability, a new disability, either if it's temporary or permanent. For example, you should be always communicated to your state government transport department. As mentioned earlier, you need vehicle modification or adaptive equipment added to the vehicle. Work with your OT who can suggest these options and provide resources for this equipment. Modification can include steering aids, that's steering balls to enable steering with one hand, or tactile grips or Velcro for people who have limited hand functions added to the steering wheel. Left foot accelerators are great for people who cannot use their right foot. Other hand controls allow you to control the vehicle, accelerator, and brakes without the need for foot controls. You can have extended mirrors and that enable a greater field of view if your vision is slightly restricted or you can't turn your head too well. Seating adjustments can also be added, including swivel types, so that to help you getting in and out of the vehicle. Now let's start on, if you get in your license for the first time, you'll need a doctor to do a report. This may include an OT driver's assessment report, and this may include the modifications you require to drive the vehicle. You then must learn to drive that vehicle and pass the driving test in that vehicle, and that condition will be added to your license. Now you've gone through that and you have your driver's license, or if you are a passenger in the vehicle, you can apply for a disabled parking permit. There are a few options available here and depend on the type of disability, if it's permanent or temporary. Permits are issued to individuals if a GP or OT can determine that you cannot walk more than 100 metres without the use of a mobility aid, such as a walker or wheelchair. And while using that aid, you need a wider parking bay to use the aid safely. Or you cannot walk due to a neurological disorder or impairment, or you cannot walk more than 100 metres without assistance of a support worker or carer. With this permit displayed, you can park your vehicle or the vehicle you're a passenger in a dedicated disabled parking bay for the time displayed on the sign. Or you can park in a normal parking bay for double the time displayed on the sign. Here in Victoria, if you're not eligible for a disabled parking permit, we have a double time permit available, and vehicle that you're a passenger in or driving, you can park that vehicle in a normal parking bay for double the time displayed on the parking sign, but you cannot park in a dedicated disabled parking space. Colours of the permits differ. So the blue is for the permanent disability and the green is for temporary disability. Victorian double time permits are not valid interstate. Normal disabled parking permits are provided if you obey the rules of that state. Australia, I've heard, is moving to a nationwide system known as ATP, which stands for Australia Disability Parking Permits. And they still may be issued by your local council, but you may need to undertake a functional assessment by GP or OT when your permit expires, if you currently hold one. These permits will be valid Australia-wide, and state and local laws may apply. Now, if you don't want to drive, or you're too scared to drive with disability, and you like to use public transport, I like to explore that option with you, because this is one of the ways I used to get around, and I still use that as my main option. Concession public transport is available in all states in Australia, which lets you travel at reduced fare. This is available to people on DSP or other healthcare card holders. Here in Victoria, if you rely on a wheelchair or mobility scooter outside the home, then you can apply for a free pass that entitles you to free public transport all over the state if that service is offered or contracted by Public Transport Victoria, known here as PTV. Other free passes are available here in Victoria, including Access Travel Pass, Assistance Animal Pass, or Vision Impaired Pass. There are many more options for you, including carers, companion cards, too many for the time allocated here. You can visit Roads Australia website for useful information on regulations and resources, as does the Department of Social Services website. I touched on WA here, and WA has a Smart Rider Travel Pass to pensioners and those on DSP to travel free on weekdays during off-peak times and all day Saturday and Sunday, or during peak times, they pay their concession fare. New South Wales and Queensland have several options available for people with disabilities, including Vision Impaired Pass and Companion Card Pass. South Australia also has free public transport for those with severe physical or disability that prevents them from using ticket validators or other equipment. This pass entitles them with unlimited free travel on trains, trams, and buses in that state. Visit the Department of Transport's website in your state or territory and search or click the concession or free passes link in that website, as conditions may vary from state to state. Accessibility to public transit also varies from state to state and is improving, including wheelchair spaces, boarding ramps, and low-floor buses and trams. All states' transport organisations allow assistance animals to travel free if they carry an assistance animal pass. And if you've got a carer with you and you hold a companion card, that carer will travel free with you. We at PDA are to help you with all available in your state or territory. Signing up for PDA is free and well worth it, and PDA have been a great resource to me, and many of its members have a great deal of, mostly by experience and trial and error. You can learn a lot from their stories and guidance. We cannot help you at this time. We will find it all out for you. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them with the required time limits. And if you require any links to the resources I've sent it to you tonight, let us know via the chat or contacting PDA, and we can provide you with these details. Now that's the end of my speech. I'd like to pass you on to Tim Hart, who will start sharing his story with you.
Thank you, Rob, for sharing your experience and advice with us. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Hart. I am joining you all today from Wadawurrung country in rural Victoria. And I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land I am on today, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I acquired disability at the age of 19 due to the nature of my disabilities. There wasn't a specific moment or event that resulted in me acquiring disability, more a development of progressively worsening medical conditions over a 6 to 12 month period. At the time, I was studying ballet in Melbourne. As my symptoms developed, it was unclear what medically was happening. At one stage, a psychiatrist told me I was experiencing anxiety and it was all in my head. A week later, I passed out for no logical reason again, and it was clear it definitely wasn't anxiety. After an extensive 2-year diagnosis journey, seeing a doctor a week at times, I finally found medical practitioners who could see through the haze of symptoms to diagnose cardiovascular and neurological medical conditions that result in physical, sensory, cognitive, and neurological impairments. I'm currently a student studying chemistry at university and a volunteer in many organisations. Today, I will briefly cover 3 main topics that have been particularly relevant to my experiences of acquiring disability. My first topic is medical systems in acquiring disability, covering the subtopics of diagnosis falsehoods, disability thresholds, and medical systems navigation. Diagnosis falsehoods. Diagnosis is an important aspect of modern medicine. However, for people who acquire disability due to sometimes complex medical conditions, diagnosis can be perceived as being of the utmost importance. Medical approaches can sometimes put excessive emphasis on finding a cause or reason for a symptom occurring instead of attempting to manage the symptom. While I agree it is valuable to know why something is happening and rule out potentially more concerning diagnoses, people are often stuck in limbo with doctors trying to find a diagnosis rather than attempting to manage their symptoms to improve their quality of life and provide a degree of stability with their health. Prior to diagnosis, the permanency of a person's disability is questionable, both to themselves and others. For me, I was sick or ill during the 2-year period it took me to get diagnosed, not disabled. The advice I provide others who are going through the diagnosis journey is yes, follow the diagnosis pathway as far as you're satisfied. Pursue management of your symptoms as much as possible during the journey. And when you reach a point where you're questioning if any good will come from a test or seeing more doctors to potentially find another answer, consider taking a break in the pursuit of diagnosis and restarting living and rebuilding your life. Disability thresholds are artificial thresholds created by society that define people as suitably disabled to be regarded as disabled by society. An example of these are rules for the disability support pension that require people's medical conditions to be permanent, fully diagnosed, treated, and stabilised. For people who acquire disability, these criteria are commonly difficult to meet. Thresholds like these keep people in a state of limbo while they are going through their diagnostic and treatment journey. In my case, to meet the fully treated criteria, I had to try a heart medication that wasn't even licensed in Australia at the time, and try pupil constricting eye drops that caused me to have severe pain and nearsightedness. People with disabilities should not have to go through such experiences just to access government support. Medical systems navigation can be challenging for the average person, but for people with disabilities who are coping with newly emerged, complex and sometimes variable symptoms, the Australian medical system can be particularly challenging to navigate. From my experiences, I've found individual and family educational background has a significant influence on the ease with which people can navigate our health system. In my case, I was lucky, as my mum is university educated and literate with healthcare terminology. Hence, when visiting my GP for referral to a specialist doctor, I was familiar with my rights and knew I could directly ask for referrals. A gap remains within the Medicare system around supporting people to access the healthcare they need. I found my current treating specialist doctor from a Google search. After the Google search, I went to my GP with a list of top specialists in different areas and asked for referrals to them. Without basic digital literacy skills developed from high school, I would not have been able to use Google to find doctors. In short, education is a significant element in health system navigation and influences the capability of people with disability to advocate for themselves within the health system. The second topic this evening that I'm going to chat on is internalised depression and its role in the journey of disability acceptance. Psycho-emotional disablism is a form of social oppression where socially imposed restrictions on people with impairments undermine their psycho-emotional well-being. An example of this is psychological welfare being impacted. An example for this for me is my psychological welfare being impacted from my exclusion from going to a club with friends due to my sensory impairments. Internalized depression is a form of psycho-emotional disablism that occurs from the relationship a person with disabilities has with themselves. Effectively, because people within society are conditioned to view disability as a negative, people with disabilities can view their own disabilities as a negative part of themselves and can psychologically oppress themselves when they view themselves as less than. Internalized depression can happen to any demographic group, not just people with disabilities. Examples include segregated people in apartheid-era South Africa, who would have experienced internalized depression due to frequently being told they were subhuman within society. Internalized depression is more likely to occur for people who acquire disability later in life because these people are faced with negative representations, preconceived ideas, or stereotypes of disability they themselves held before acquiring disability. In my journey, I unfortunately only learned about internalized depression and models of disability after I'd accepted my disability. Models of disability, particularly the social model, help many people understand their disabilities and realize that many issues they experience are not caused by their disabilities, but by disabling parts of society. For me, the biopsychosocial model of disability assisted me greatly in my journey. In short, the biopsychosocial model bio part covers people's physiological experiences, such as impairment effects like the pain I experience from my conditions. The psycho part covers psychological experiences, such as internalized depression. And social part covers factors within the social environment, including barriers such as stairs. If I had learned about models of disability and internalized depression earlier, I think I would have separated what was wrong with society from my disabilities earlier and not oppress myself as a result of issues within society that are not my responsibility. My final topic this evening is my experience of acquiring disability as a young person. When I acquired disability, I became disconnected from my entire network of friends and social support. I think when young people acquire disability, they are far more likely to experience social disconnection and associated loss of existing support if the acquisition coincides with other significant changes. Such transitions include the high school transition to work or higher education. How peers respond to the acquisition of disability, either through compassion or through less helpful responses such as stigmatization, can significantly influence the degree to which young people feel alienated within their peer group. So what is it like meeting people and forming social connections as a young person who has recently acquired disability? Well, I found out about 9 out of 10 people who found out I was disabled would immediately bring up that they knew some friend's kid or other young person who had been ill or had had health issues as well. I think this is in some way related to the tragedy model of disability, where people with disabilities are regarded as brave, suffering people. I think people felt they needed to cite an example of another young person who was going through similar circumstances to communicate from their view that other people's lives were over too. Some of the disabled friend of a friend examples were pretty funny, like a 20-year-old friend of a friend who had stopped drinking for 2 months because they had had a bad flu. Not quite the same thing. People seem to do this less now I'm a bit older. I think people in their early 20s and late teens get it more, perhaps because them acquiring disability is perceived as more tragic. I found such language did impact my thinking about myself, and it did take me a while to get past the view that I was a tragedy. I now don't view my disabilities as a tragedy or an inspiration. I just view them as reality. This is me, this is what I experience. If other people have skewed views on that or are uncomfortable about the reality of my existence, then that's their issue. I think laughing at all the awkward comments from people helped me to normalize my views on my own disabilities. So what helped me in my journey as a young person? In short, my mum, the disability community, and peer support. Mums are awesome. I don't think I need to say more on that topic. I initially found the disability community through Facebook groups for medical conditions. These helped me to better understand my conditions and realize that I wasn't alone. They also showed me people at different stages in their diagnosis and treatment journeys. Seeing people who developed the same condition as me when they were young and who are now back to working part-time made a big difference for me in accepting the present and looking forward to the future. Peer support, such as that provided by the Physical Disability Australia Youth Network, has been invaluable for me, helping me to be better informed, happier, and more resilient as I continue my journey. Young people with disabilities, despite our diversity, often have a lot of experiences in common. This shared understanding creates a great safe space to not be alone in our journeys. Peer Connect is a great website resource that lists most peer support programs across Australia. I encourage all people with disabilities to have a Google, sign up as a member of disabled people's organisations like Physical Disability Australia, and come along to peer support events. I'll now hand over to Andrew Fairburn to speak.
Thank you, Tim. That's some really, really interesting information, and I have to agree with you 100%. As our mums do become a big part of this journey. Thank you for everybody for coming today. As Tim said, my name is Andrew. I'm the president of Physical Disability Australia and also the WA State Director. And I bring you greetings from Wajak Noongar Boodja, where I live 11 kilometres north of the city of Perth. So this afternoon, I'm going to touch on a few different things. I'm going to have a very short look at elective surgery, and then a little bit about employment, and then a bit about access. And I'm mindful of time because I want to get some questions from you guys, the audience, who are our community. And that's what we're here to do, is to get some questions from you guys. Anything that's burning, if you want to put anything in the chat, that would be wonderful. It's being looked after in the background by our wonderful communications and engagement manager, Natasha, and she's going to look after the chat for us. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them up there. So a little bit about my story. I am a left below knee amputee due to an ongoing issue with an infection over a period of about 10 years. In that 10 years, I reckon I've probably burned through about 5,000 litres of antibiotics. At one stage, for those of you who know what a PICC line is, when they stick them in your arm here, I had one in each arm, and I was on permanent PICC line for 7 months. So as a result of that, my hair fell out, my teeth basically have cracked, most of my organs packed up, and this was just due to an infection in my foot. So I made a decision halfway through 2014 that it was time for the leg to go. I was 46 years old, and I made the decision, with consultation with my wife and my children, that I'd had enough. This was time to go. I did a whole bunch of research, and Australia Day in 2015, the 26th of January, I'd found a vascular surgeon who would actually be willing to take my leg off, and he came and saw me. I was in hospital. So imagine Perth, January 26th, beautiful weather. I'm stuck in hospital. I should have been at the beach. And he turned up in my room at the hospital in his board shorts and a singlet, and he'd been at the beach. And I sort of cracked it. And I said to him, he was like, oh, we can try this, we can do that. And I said, you know what? I said, no, it's time to go. And I said, mate, if you're not going to do it for me, I said, I'm going to check myself out of hospital. I'm going to go home. I will drink what's left of my bottle of scotch. I will smoke half a bag of weed, and I will cut it off myself. And then I'll be back tomorrow for you to fix it all up. And then, so on the 25th of February, that's 2015, that I had my amputation done at 8 o'clock in the morning. I spent 6 days in hospital, and then I came home. I've done all my amputee rehab as an outpatient. But for me, that decision to have that done was all about quality of life. When you've got a medical condition that can be fixed, and the fix is actually having the amputation, it's a life-changing decision. I'm always thankful that I didn't have anything like cancer. I wasn't involved in a motor vehicle accident, but having that infection, I needed to have something done with it. So down the track, I'm 8 years down the track now. I'm coming up to 8 years as an amputee. There's no drugs, there's no booze. My whole demeanor has changed. And as Tim alluded to in his session, it's all about peer support. I've had some really, really strong peer supporters who've helped me walk through this journey. So I also encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to explore elective surgery if it's something that can work for you. Don't take no for an answer. It's about you. This is your quality of life we're talking about. It was my quality of life. Opportunities since then that have opened up. Physical Disability Australia, I would have never thought that 8 years ago, I'd take over an organisation and become the president of it, of a national organisation. But I'm very proud to have done that, and I'm very proud of the team that I've got around me, because they are absolutely brilliant in everything that they do. I do a lot of work now in advocacy. So I spend most of my time in systemic advocacy work, so changing systems, and that's something that we can all do. individually and collectively, which is very important. And I also I have the honor of working for an organization called Limbs for Life, which is our peak body for amputees in Australia. I run projects here in Western Australia and also South Australia and the Northern Territory. So all opportunities have come that wouldn't have happened before. So a little bit about employment now. Look, I think as someone who's older, my job previously to becoming an amputee and acquiring the disability, I was a school teacher. I taught music in high schools. I couldn't do that anymore when I got sick. So I had to change careers. And that led me into working into the disability sector. So I suppose in a real nutshell, acquiring a disability doesn't mean the end of life working. All it does mean, it means you may have to change your direction some way. And I look back on it now as a sea change. I got to explore new opportunities. I got to explore different options. I got to explore different training and development, personal development. So there was a whole bunch of good stuff came out of acquiring that disability, to the point now where I'm qualified as an assistive technology mentor. I've gone back to studying photography, and I still get to play music every day. So it's yes, it's different to what I was doing before, but it's not insurmountable when you actually acquire a disability. And finally, just a little bit about access. One of the biggest concerns that I had personally having an amputation done was how was I going to access things once I had it done, and then when I went home, and you're outside of that bubble of the health system that looks after you and protects you when you're in rehab. You've got to give yourself time to explore things and explore new opportunities around your actual physical access. The first time I went shopping I'm not a full-time wheelchair user, but I do use a wheelchair when I get tired. The first time I went shopping and tried to get something out of a freezer and sort of leaned over and almost fell out of my chair. Now, I'm 6'3", I weigh 130 kilos, so I'm not tiny, but I couldn't reach anything out of the freezer sitting in my wheelchair. So it gets you to thinking, okay, well, that's a physical barrier that the shopping centre's put in there that I can't go and get stuff out of the freezer. My local Woolies has just put in a whole new bank of fridges, which are great. I can sit in my chair and open the door, but all the shelves are so far back, I can't actually access those shelves. So again, I'd have to actually lean into the freezer, into the fridge to try and get things out. That's another physical barrier. So I suppose, I look at it that way, that it's not about, as Tim said as well, I really don't care what people think of me and being an amputee, but when society disables us by changing things that then we can't access them, how do you get over that? That's the question you ask. And again, as Tim and Robert have both said, having people around you who can help you walk that journey through peer support is really, really important. If you haven't seen it, and I'm going to get Natasha to email the link out to you all once we finish this webinar, I strongly suggest you have a look at the Stella Young TED Talk. It's called I'm Not Your Inspiration. She talks a lot about, the outside world looks at us and sees that inspiration. I remember one of the first things that was, said to me when I had my amputation done was, so when are you going to go and get one of those running blade things? As I said, I'm 6'4", I weigh 130 kilos. I couldn't run before my amputation, and there was no way I'm going to run now. It's just not my bag. It's for sure for some people, yeah, aspire to that, but it's just not for me. So I really encourage you to have a look at that Stella Young TED Talk. I'm Not Your Inspiration. And I also encourage you, as Tim did, to seek out your disability-specific Facebook groups, social media, anything around that. Thank you, Tim. Tim's just put it in the chat for the link to the Stella Young talk. I strongly encourage you to get involved in your disability-specific community. The amputee community in Australia is very strong and it's very large. For an example, in Western Australia alone, there's over 9,000 amputees. So we have a very, very large community. So I encourage you to do that, because that's where you're going to get a lot of your disability specific tips and tricks on how to get through things once you've acquired a disability. And you'll also get that peer support that we've all spoken about, because that's going to be very, very valuable for you into your journey. There's also things, like Australia is a big country. If you want to go traveling, check out things around accommodation, travel, and how you can navigate those sort of things. So, I remember my dad used to say to me, there's no such thing as a dumb question. So any questions that you have, ask them. And, these places are the disabled people's organisations are safe spaces to ask questions. It doesn't matter if you think that they're dumb, they're not, because we've all had that thought as well. So I'd encourage you to do that. So that's just a little insight into 9 different areas that we as a trio have faced. There's obviously we could go into a lot deeper information, but we're on a time frame. So I want to hand over to you. Is there any questions? Has anybody got any questions? Is anything in the chat? Just let me have a real quick look. There's the TED links to the TED talk. Did I see a question in the? No, there's no open questions. Robert, did you have someone give you a question there?
No, I got nothing.
Okay.
No.
How about you, Tim? Has anybody given you a question there?
I've got one that's, there's two open that's just popped up.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, excellent. Oh, cool. All right. We have a question from Tammy. The three of us know Tammy well. She's on our board as well. Greetings in Tasmania. I hope you're not freezing to death down there, Tammy. Tammy's asked the question, how did your family cope? Me specifically, I walked my family through this with me, and they have been very, very supportive and very resilient as well. So, Tim, do you want to answer that one a little bit as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, family has been a massive support. I think for young people in particular, and I know I've sort of interacted with some friends who've been through the foster system in Victoria, and who've acquired disability and had, obviously a lot more difficult experiences without that family support. So, yeah, it's been invaluable for me, certainly. And I guess, obviously, families' understanding and acceptance of people's disability is a reflection of our own acceptance too. So, it's a big learning curve for them as well as a big learning curve for us. And I think my whole family is far more educated now on the barriers that exist for people with disability within society. And yeah, I think a lot of us didn't know that before we all went through this journey.
Excellent. How about you, Robert?
On that too, about my family. My family were great when they were shocked at first when I was diagnosed, but they were a great help. They let me live with them for a while until I almost fully recovered and was ready to go back into my own home. And they helped me with that transition really well. So family is your first port of call, as I say.
Excellent, thank you. We have a comment in the chat from Peter Simpson. Peter's in New South Wales. His local Woolies put in a great number of fridges, and he says they're a pain in the bum. Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you there, Peter. And especially when they say, "I'll get an employee to get stuff out of the fridges," and they sort of like they cut down on the amount of employees they've got on the floor, so it's really hard to do that. And I think it's a really important point you've brought up there, Peter, about instigating the new fridges when no one has an idea about access in those spaces. And I think that for when you acquire a disability later in life, it's actually not something you think about until you actually get out there in society and see how many places and how many things are actually inaccessible. pardon me, and being involved in these sort of, in like the disabled people's organisations like PDA, we can actually help with that by bringing it to the attention of the businesses and things like that. So there's always options for that. But thanks, Pete, for that. I appreciate it. Jeanette's asked a question. Do you have people say to you, you are so lucky you do not have to go to work? I'm in a wheelchair and used to work until frequent hospital admissions interrupted that. I was devastated to leave work. I do not feel lucky. How do you answer that comment if you have it? I think from my perspective, Jeanette, this preconception or misconception that disabled people can't work is still a really big part of our society. And I always just come back to people and say, well, I do work. I work 2 paid jobs, and I sit on 3 different boards, and I do a lot of volunteer work. So yeah, I do work. It's, you know, devastating, and I agree with you. It's devastating to have to leave a job that you love doing, but sometimes, you know, there's other ways that we can assist with changing the job around so you can actually stay there. But for me personally, I just tell people, you know what, that's their perception, and it's a misconception, and I really don't care what they think. Because I know what I do, and I know that I work, and I don't feel I would feel devastated like you would if I wasn't able to work. So I appreciate that question. Thank you.
There's another one here from Tammy. How do you deal with mental health and disability? How can you get it done?
It can. I think she means it can get you down.
Down, I think, yeah, it's about, yeah, I think so. I think that's what she's saying. Yeah.
Tim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take point in that.
Cool.
So look, yeah, I guess I had sort of mental health issues and ups and downs in my late teens before acquiring disability. So I guess it's something that's not new to me. But yeah, so certainly I find it's a bit of a cycle of, and also my treatment and management of my conditions works on about a 10-week cycle. So weeks 8 to 10 of that 10-week cycle is normally pretty challenging. I'm in a lot more pain. So obviously I'm more likely to, you know, be feeling down during that time. I think the only advice I could provide that I think works for me is just sort of distracting myself with doing lots of things and being involved in different things. I volunteer with a lot of different organisations, and I find that that gives me a good headspace because it means that I can, I guess, escape from thinking about me and living in my pain and body, and I guess think about other things, and that I think helps for me. It probably doesn't help for everyone, but yeah, so certainly I think that's the only thing that I think I've found works really well.
Thanks, Tim. So Jeanette's put a little comment in there as well. She's also works on boards and committees, but often that isn't always acknowledged. I agree with you, Jeanette. It's something that people, we in the disability community see that as valuable, that experience and that sense of service is very valuable. So I just encourage you to continue that work. It's sometimes hard. You've got to build up a bit of a tough love stance to some people when they in that space of, you know, like, you're so lucky. Yeah, no, it's got nothing to do with luck. It is where you are, and you know, if it gets to the point where it becomes too hard, then sometimes you've just got to walk away. Tammy did ask about family. I've had members of not my immediate family, but my extended family. They don't talk to me anymore because they don't know how to deal with my physical disability. And I'm okay with that because I still love them, but I love them from a distance. I don't need that type of stuff in my life. I've got enough really close friends and really good associates to work with that feed me in that space as well. So that's pretty cool. There's a question in here. Annette Lawrence has asked a question about elective surgery for shaving some neck discs. To be very honest, I don't know how to answer that. I would just don't know, Annette. But I tell you what, Tim's actually going to type you an answer, so that's cool. Oh,
I can type an answer for that.
Sorry,
but I would say, Annette, yeah, obviously navigating the health system is never easy, as I said. But I've literally just popped a link in response to your question to the Australian Disability Gateway, which, although the format isn't quite as great as I would like it, that Department of Social Services has ended up with for the Gateway, it's quite a good resource to help you to find state-based advocacy services and services to help you not just in navigating the disability system, but also navigating the health system. So hopefully that resource will assist in some way with navigating that journey, and all the best.
we have some really nice comments in there.
Sure,
And thank you for everybody for putting them in. You're very welcome, Nick. It's not a problem. That's what we do here at Physical Disability Australia, is sharing our stories and sharing. We honestly believe that in this particular part of the world, in the physical disability spaces, we are the peak body, and we need to make sure that we put this out there, that people can see it. That it's not always rainbows and unicorns. There is a lot of heartache goes into to things that happen to the people. Sometimes we don't feel lucky, and we all have to adjust and change. And as someone else, as an anonymous attendee has said, peer mentoring or peer support groups are an amazing resource, because they're people just like you. And here, as I've said, we're at that place where it is a safe space, and anything you want to share can do that. Jeanette's said using psychological service can be a part of treatment plan for people with disabilities and chronic illness, which is very, very true. And I highly recommend those over drugs and booze, because they are actually much, much better. Even 8 years on, I still see a psychotherapist. So I agree with that. Anonymous attendee has said inspiration porn sucks. I think we can all agree on that. I could point to at least a dozen occasions where total strangers have told me how inspirational it is that I'm out doing my shopping. Yes, I think we've all been through that at some way, shape, and form. Right. And Anonymous has also put in there some great resources online, YouTube and other places regarding sex and disability, and Touching Base, which is an amazing resource. Okay, so what else we got in here? Peter Simpson. Peter's also on my board, and he's access consultant. By his comments and his questions, we know that's one of his passions, is about that. He's spoken about access to the light rail system. I saw a horrific one of those, Peter, the other day. Was a guide dog with someone who was vision impaired, and the guide dog couldn't find the edge of the road and walked onto the actual light rail because they couldn't find. So obviously someone who has no idea about what they're doing has planned this and built it. And I always say to my board, this is about physical disability. Disability is very, very broad. Every single one of my board members is different. But collectively, we bring that voice to say, you know what, if you're designing or building something without us, then you're not doing it properly. So, anybody who's here in the Zoom room tonight has got the opportunity to join up with us, walk with us on this journey, because it's a really, really important journey. We've got Tammy. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeanette. I really appreciate that. And Jeanette's written in the comments, you are not inspiring them, they want to pray for you. If you're not inspiring them, they want to pray for you. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a topic that we could cover just on its own. So look, I'm looking at the time. We're right on top of our hour. So I would like to thank my fellow panelists, Robert and Tim, for their work that they've put in on this. I'd really like to thank Natasha in the background for doing all the stuff that Robert, Tim, and I don't know how to do, especially me because I'm old and I don't understand the technology and stuff. It's been our pleasure and honour to be in your office, lounge room, wherever you are visiting from tonight. Please stay in touch with us. Natasha's going to send out an email post this webinar that you can actually help us by looking at our webinars on YouTube and then filling in a short survey for us. And then we can get some funding from the Department of Social Services on the back of those surveys, which we need as an organisation. We rely on donations and some government funding, but we're always right in the need to get more to keep doing the work that we're doing. So if you've enjoyed this webinar, please go to our YouTube channel and Natasha will send you the links to those and to the surveys, and we can we will do that. And also, lastly, you can also sign up for membership of Physical Disability Australia. And if you have a burning topic as a member, if you have a burning topic and you'd feel like you'd like to have a go at doing a webinar for the community, we're always open to those sort of things. And I think the pardon me, the website for membership is www.pda.org.au/membership. And we would love to welcome you all there. Thank you for the questions as well from everybody. For my board, I look forward to seeing you at our board meeting next week. For the rest of you, thank you so much for being here tonight. And I would like to bid you good night and good evening and good night wherever you are in Australia. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one that we hold. So thank you very much for your time tonight.